Amazing. So why don't you start off with sort of going into who you think at the minute is most disadvantaged by the current big cheeses? Do you want to sort of kick us off, Ewelina, on your side of that one?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you come talking about disadvantage, it comes basically from both sides. It comes from the agency side as well as the client. As you can imagine, representing client side here, but I do a lot of RFPs with new agency. And since I joined WISE and doing a global event, RFP became as a part of my job on a regular basis. What I see from the client side, from my side, would be talking about high evaluation workload. We're talking about how the events become more complex and more globalized. So we still do the events globally, but still there is a very important part of it with the localization and how we personalize those events locally. And what I struggle with as well is the delivering events like for like. So what I do in London, I'm not necessarily going to be able to do in Sao Paulo or Singapore or another country. So I think this is a big disadvantage as well. And also what I'm struggling with, or the disadvantage actually, are the risk of being sold rather than actually partner with. I feel like everything become transaction. It's no more about building relationships. It's not about getting know each other. It's more about transaction base. And this is something which I really struggle with. And I think the time pressure of making the right call. We don't have as much time as we would anticipate to. So sometimes we go for the decisions much quicker than I would like to. We don't have enough time to go for it. But this is like from my side, but what I see working with agencies is the heavy uplift of the amount of RFP coming the way, talking about resources pressure as well, finding the right people for the right jobs and being able to specialize in all this as well. So this is kind of like the starting point from my perspective, but I'll let you jump into it. Bill?
Yeah. To build on that, I think we have, on our side, it's the resource side of things and actually just the transparency from the client side that we really know what's coming in, setting our expectations and taking out some of the guesswork of the competitive landscape. And we spend so much time kind of trying to second guess that part of it that you don't get into the actual crux of actually understanding and being able to deliver on the brief. Equally, the amount of resource that it does burn through and having to go through each time when you're getting it, weighing up, okay, yes, we're going to go for it or we're not, and weighing up that decision process and being fair on both sides. And again, having just things like too many people in the process and knowing that, it might be a ghost RFP that, that it's a tick box exercise from procurement. We spend a lot of time trying to suss that out, which burns through a lot of resource that could be spent either on the client side or actually creating, a great answer to the brief.
Yeah, I would echo all those points. I think for me, Ewelina, you touched on it, and I would always kind of reverse that, where I think we spend so much time seemingly building relationships with the people that we're talking to at the companies over a period of months, even years, quite often, and you feel like that relationship is quite strong. And then actually, when you get to procurement and you get to the RFP, it becomes very transactional. We've had very clear instructions where we cannot approach any contact that we've got there. All the questions that we submitted, the answers are shared with everyone, which we'll probably come on to in terms of sort of my feelings around that. So I would almost kind of flip it around. I think it becomes you build those relationships, and it becomes very transactional and seemingly very cost based. But then to echo Natalie's point as well, the transparency. And I think how are the RFPs being evaluated and what is that criteria? Because without that clarity, it's very, very difficult to know whether you should be pitching or not. Because if it's 90% cost based, then you've got a question to answer there. And I think it's trying to get that answer is very difficult.
And I think you talked about it yesterday. We had our catch up on procurement and how procurement comes into the picture. And I always see there is, from the client side, sometimes there's a big disconnection between procurement and us as event specialists. I was very fortunate the way how I work is I would search for the agencies. I work with agency building the relationship, and I'm in a position where I can go to the procurement team and say like, hey, this is the 3 agencies I want you to go and do the due diligence and check, the prices and help me out. Where I know in many places is actually the other way around. The procurement team would be the one doing this. So yes, as you mentioned, you build a relationship with me, but yet the procurement will step in and try to take this away. And this is going to be very controversial, but my question always is the procurement team in a position to have the knowledge of the event specialist and to pick the right agency? So I think this is a very big subject to talk about. And it can come as a controversial because I'm not questioning any capability of doing it or capacity, but yet we as event specialists should have more saying into it. So I appreciate that. And I know how difficult can be from the point of agency versus the procurement and internal. And it comes from us as a clients. Like, our efficiency at times isn't straightforward neither. It's a long steps to go ahead. So I definitely agree with it. And I can literally be like sympathize with your side as well as my side, to be honest.
I mean, you touched on a bit of procurement there. How does that affect on the agency side, the sort of culture and talent retention that you guys have within your agency as itself?
And we see, frequently, depending on how many RFPs you'll absorb it and what that does to the team. And again, you kind of, you go through a winning streak, you go through a losing streak. Every single time you go through an RFP process, you'll learn it. And, it forces you and it pushes you to be more creative, to collaborate in a completely different way. There's huge value to going through the process. But it does need better guardrails around it, and it needs to have a fairer process. The other thing we see is quite often it's a very, very good process until the pitch, and then actually where it falls down is post-pitch. And it's post-pitch, that period between post-pitch and award, and that's where, that asking for more information, and that's where the relationship piece can start to play into it, which can become quite frustrating, but then the impact that has on the team is huge, because it doesn't feel fair all of a sudden, or the amount of time and energy that was put into it has an impact on your live work and your live clients. And that's a really, really hard thing to effectively manage with the team, keeping everybody engaged, and making sure that everyone still feels valued as part of the process, because there is huge value every time you go through the process.
I think from my side, I think there's typically two ways to respond to an RFP. I call them the kind of the 2 R's. So either respond in exactly what they've asked for, or reframe. So actually challenge what they're asking for and try and do a deeper dive into the brief, but not necessarily to the brief, but actually the challenges that the client is facing and actually what they're trying to solve by going to tender. To respond is usually relatively easy, because it's fairly black and white what people, in terms of what they're after, and you can kind of without stereotyping, you can probably more easily put junior resource onto that. But to actually reframe it and ask the deeper questions needs a more of a strategic response to it, and that carries a cost to the business. And it's, can you afford, to the point before, if you're not quite sure what the criteria is in the marketing criteria and whether you should be going for it or not, can you actually afford to put your best people on it, or your most strategic thinkers on it, if it's only going to be based on cost anyway in terms of the decision. So I think to try and get that balance in the agency and the way that affects the culture and how you recruit and the overheads that you kind of keep hold of to respond to that sort of stuff was a big decision.
I suppose, Ewelina, for you, when you're receiving these pitches, how can agencies differentiate their pitches without sort of going above and beyond, or without the investment, not necessarily from a financial cost, but from a time cost as well?
Yeah. I think it's quite hard to be able to just give one solid answer. I think when we look into the agencies you work with, first of all, going back to like retention and changes in a team, like I totally put myself in a position, if I'm in an agency and I keep pitching, and it just become kind of just the pitches. Like you don't actually get the physical work, because you think you're doing all your work, like you got the creativity, I think the morale of the team goes really down. And that can also translate to us, obviously, doing it different projects. But from the perspective how I see, sometimes less is more. And then the pitching process, it shouldn't be for you to spend 3-4 weeks doing research and a massive case study and doing this, in fact, mostly for free. Like, right, we're going to talk about the cost in a minute, but we know that most of the works and the effort goes into for free. So I would rather build the knowledge and the case study around what you're capable of doing, and show me less than more to start with, and actually feel the confidence in me. I've received these fancy presentations and they were like outstanding, and I know there is weeks of work. But at the same time, like, I don't really know you. You can show anything on the pictures. You can really come and try to pitch to me. And let's be honest, sales people are the best people in the business. They know how to sell to you or anything. But then what you actually see in results is another question. Sometimes less is much more. Like, I would rather pay more money for something which is really relevant and impactful to my events than actually trying to do something in the reverse side. That makes sense.
I suppose what brings us on to the creative side of things as well. When you're building those pitches, I mean, should intellectual property be something you charge for as well?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think we must be one of the very few sectors where you're expected to give away all of your ideas and then someone just walk away and not exchange any kind of remuneration at all. I mean, I kind of liken it to if you had a plot of land and you spoke to an architect, you'd probably go to 3 architects. To Ewelina's point, you'd look at the work, you'd look at the results, and you'd decide off the back of that. You wouldn't expect them to do full renders of a house, design everything, and then just say, "No, I'm not bothered. I'll go to the cheaper person," and probably lick the ideas as well. Not that I'm being cynical, but yeah, 100%. And again, I think different clients differ in their response. We had a client that came to us recently who said, "How much would it be for you to pitch to us?" We're like, "What?" It's like, you're actually going to pay us, and I mean, that is very few and far between. Certainly in our experience, there is just an expectation in the industry that you have to give those ideas away, and even if you stand your ground, someone else probably will, and therefore you will probably miss out. So we were talking a bit about a code of conduct, haven't we? And
I think that's the thing. Having a rules of engagement, I think, would make it so much easier on both sides of the fence, and that way everyone knows what they're signing up for. And again, particularly on protecting your IP and protecting your ideas, we see it all the time. We talked about this before, where you go through that process and then you see your ideas pop up on social media somewhere else, and that's incredibly demoralizing to the team, and it's not professional and it's not okay. But there's a level of expectation, unfortunately, that sits within it that we kind of accept it. But it's it's not good practice.
Should it be like that? I mean, when I see in terms of the pricing, and probably once again, in my previous job, we didn't do RFP as often because we would actually pay the agencies to go through the process. Hence why I was very careful how we approached the RFP process, which agency we engaging with, and how much work we required from them to put into the project. So when we talk about small projects, very simple, straightforward, I would say from my client side, I would say no, I would not want to pay for it. But when it comes to more complex, when I really want you to go and do your research, case study, when I want you to really go into creative mindset, I wouldn't expect you to do this for free. Hence why a lot of companies are struggling because they have no budgets to actually pay for RFP processes. And yet then we would think about which are the right agencies to go and approach and actually put the money and effort to it. So from my side, as much as I know a lot of companies don't do it, I would really have a discussion around putting some money and effort to the agencies because it's not fair. It's not fair. And I see this from both sides. I've never worked for agencies, by the way, but I work with many agencies throughout, over 17 years in events. And I appreciate all the work and effort going to. And I sometimes feel bad, but it shouldn't be given you want to be in the business. You come and you do all this work for us. And then we'll be like, oh, sorry, not this time. Let's do it again. And then you keep coming back to me 3-4 times and I just take your ideas. And we've seen this in a business and I've seen many times, which once again is not really fair. I feel like I'm speaking probably from agencies, I don't a client, but I see myself in a both, in a both shoes and as a human being as well. There's a duty of care on actually building those relationships.
I think as well, right, to that point, your ability to question a brief is your ability to respond to a brief as well. So back to that kind of, whether you're just responding or whether you're actually, reframing it as well and asking some of the deeper questions that maybe haven't been thought about. I think one of my big bugbears is that, we try and ask those deeper questions. We don't just look at the event and what you're asking for, but what's it part of? What's it, what's the direction of the company? How is that helping it? This is going to be the firework moment, but what's next? How do we keep the messages alive? And we will ask some pretty deep and telling questions around that to try and, like I said, try and get to the bottom of it. And there was one particular one where, we'd create this list of questions and they're all published publicly with the answers. And someone else has said, do you need one lectern or 2 lecterns on stage? It was like, that was the level of their question. It was like, well, if they're there and how is that, how are we playing apples for apples there? So I think, back to your IP, I think that the whole sharing of questions isn't fair, personally.
It's interesting actually when we get agencies pitching and sharing one document for all the questions for all the agencies. I mean, in my mind, you asking questions, it actually prompts something for the other agency to be more creative. And I'm like, no, I want you to win for a reason, not because you're getting something from the other agency. So I never do that. I never give a one share document. I would rather appreciate you setting up the meeting when we can go through all the questions prior to actually you putting work into it than just basing on the simple questions and answers. And I've been in a situation where we share one document and I'm like, but that is not right. That helps the other agencies, which they're actually not as good as the others in a different perspective, right? I'm not saying that, but it shouldn't be, in my mind, it shouldn't be one shared question document where everyone's got access to it.
I can actually top that as well because we got a brief through and the client said, oh, would you be willing to jump on a call and chat through? So I said, yeah, no problem. Jumped on this call in the morning, clicked on the Teams link, joined the call and there's 2 other agencies there. I was like, what are you doing here? Like, what are you doing here? I knew them fairly well. So they'd invited every agency they were going to tender onto the same Teams call to ask questions around the brig. It was just like, that's just ridiculous. It's not.
That is not acceptable.
So apparently I just sat with my arms folded and was in a mood.
It's just like it's like going for job interview and City had the same role with like 5 different, potential things. I was like, hey, yeah, so what do you know better than I do? I'm like, yeah, it's just good ideas.
It's point to you that yes, it's meant to be creating a fair process, but it's laziness and it's trying to cut through the time so they don't have to do it many times. But that for us actually became like we kind of had a rule book, and there were a couple of red flags, and it's like, okay, well, if someone hasn't got the time to spend on a call with us to go through this, then actually should we be spending that amount of time actually going through the RFP process like that? When you're weighing it up, that sort of behavior does help you decide whether you're going to do it or not.
100%.
And I think it like works both ways. Like, it's not just about us, you trying to work with us. Like, it's awesome. We have to make an effort to be able to show you the care and the commitment to it. So I definitely agree. Like, if I don't have time for you, why would you put effort to work with me?
Yeah.
We have quite I'm looking at LA, my colleague, but we've got quite an interesting like qualification document so every time a new inquiry or a new player comes through, there's probably 6 or 7 questions that will score it out of 10, and one of them is the incumbent being approached, and if so, why? Because we want to know that. And the other is how much time have they invested with us before this process? Because then it's genuine. You're not just being found on the internet and
well, and I think that's the other thing. Clients, you just mentioned it as well. Like we all talk to each other.
Yeah.
Like we all have a relationship with each other, and so even though we're competitors, there is a collegiate atmosphere around it, and that expectation should be expected on the client side, that actually if you don't treat agencies appropriately, like we're going to talk to each other, and that that doesn't help anybody.
Got a few cases of that with in my previous agency as well, so we won't digress names.
I mean, I suppose on that, can you highlight any examples where those where pitching led to some of the long-term, more successful relationships you've had with everything?
Yeah, I think like you say, when we've been through that kind of that qualification process and they have scored high and we've said, yeah, actually we're going to go for it, and we invest, the client invests in you as much as you invest in them, then that's brilliant. You get a sense for the type of people that you want to deal with and the nature of that procurement process. And we were talking about this work around transparency. I think if you have got those open channels where you can ask questions, where there's a two-way flow, rather than waiting 4 weeks to kind of present your final idea and hope that it lands, with our clients, where it's been like an iterative process. So we submit the first document, we decided to like it, and you can see already there that there's a partnership starting to form, and therefore it's willing, you're willing to put a little bit more time and discretionary effort into it, and often then when if you win that piece of work, the platform is already set, and there's trust there, and trust is a massive thing. That trust has already been built over the process, and you can go on to achieve great things. We've done some brilliant things in the cast off the back of that. Yeah.
We had a few where we haven't necessarily, we've been down to the final 2. It's been a really difficult decision for the client, and it's been a really positive process, and it has followed all the right transparency and everything, and we haven't won it, but going through that process has been able to show what we're capable of doing, and that's then meant that other projects have come to us that haven't gone through RFP because you've used it as a way to be able to build that relationship, and then that feels quite good, and that really, really helps the process along. So again, back to sort of the value of going through it, but as long as everybody shows up with the right perspective and the right code of conduct.
I think this one thing I want to add is, prior COVID, we work with many different agencies for the same project, because there was no agencies. I had a few conversations today about there was not many agencies who could specialize in everything. Then COVID hit it, and then all of a sudden every agency had to find the right people for the right jobs and build the portfolio of doing everything in the same time. And I remember being in the process of RFP, which I shortlisted 2 agencies as the final step. And then I'm like, but neither of you can deliver everything I want. What about you both work together? And they say no. So my question is, like, why would you do it? Like, I feel personally I would rather work with 4 agencies, but they work collaboratively together and they all get business, then neither of them gets business. And I think I struggled lately where yes, you might specialize in everything, but are you actually really good in everything? That's another question. And the same with us, events professionals. Like, there's not many left which actually can do execution and planning and delivery and comms and content and so on. That's why we've got logistical managers, we've got producers, we've got content people. There's not many who can actually do everything. And the same goes to agency. Like, I would rather work with few different, but on the same project than not doing at all. And I think me doing a project in Tallinn now in Estonia in June for 6,000 people, the agency I work with, they can't do it all based on Estonia because Estonia's got limitation in terms of the tech and resources we need. And that's why we bring in other agencies from other countries to make sure they work together. But my contact is the agency in Tallinn, and they have to work collaboratively with other agencies. And I think that would be really something to consider for agencies to start putting that in practice more a little bit.
I think that's really interesting. I think then that comes back down to trust. I think so. If you can, again, so you point, you've got short time frames to generally work in, so therefore you've kind of almost got to really immerse yourself in that. And as long as everyone's, like I said, playing ball, and that's fine. We've had it before where we had a client and they were working for the end client, but they phoned us and said, "Oh, do you do theming?" We said, "We don't, but there's somebody we can bring in." We were totally transparent and introduce them. The company that we brought in kicked us out for our side of things. So it's like, it's just, everyone's, as long as everyone's playing ball, and they'll generally only do it once because everyone talks.
Yeah, it's really hard because I had also had conversation today with someone showing me the structures they can build, and I was like, "Hey, are they like, sunproof?" And he was like, "No, but this company on this stand they can do this for you." So it's like, it's really nice one person can recommend the business to another, and then eventually we're gonna work together anyway. So I just really wish like we all would start actually looking out of the box and try to work more collaboratively, trying to go rather than going to the big competition. And I know it is easy to say for me, for a client, but I think having, £100,000 investment in one agency and hundreds another is better than not having none in terms of the agency and the business we're getting. And once you say as well, like, I recommend the agency I used to work with to either part of the business. So obviously I run the internal events and talent attraction events, but we do have a lot of executive assistants who are running smaller site visits, offsites, VP conferences and so on. And they actually getting the recommendation from me. So I can recommend different agencies for different part of job. And I think that's kind of go a longer term relationship rather than not at all.
I know I said I wouldn't throw in a curveball here today, but Natalie, you mentioned earlier about the sort of best practice kind of or guidelines for earlier in the talk. What would be sort of your number one thing that you put in there to sort of, I guess, make a more fair and effective pitch process for everyone?
I think in an ideal world, if when we accepted, an RFP, there could be some sort of, code of conduct or that we both sign up to. And it is, whether, and we've had it where you can have that conversation at procurement level so that they're filtering that down. But equally from our side, and even just as an agency cohort, look, this is how we're going to play this, and these are the expectations, and we both sign up to that together. I think that would be really, really helpful just to cut through a lot of the guesswork. We spend so much time, wasting time second guessing who's in the process, and like just having transparency even around that. Are we one of 3, or we one of 5, or we one of 7? Stuff like that really, really helps you be able to spend the right amount of time on actually, doing the real work.
Would be the top of yours.
Yeah, again, in a dream world. So I have a vision. I mean, if there could be a way of, like you say, creating a sort of a uniformed response where it's kind of standard across the board. Let's say there's 5 level of responses. Level 5 is in its simplest form. Level 1 is its most complex form. And so, Ewelina's point, if you knew that from level 3 upwards, it was going to be paid, and it was really clear. Actually, we expect a level 2 response here, and it's a uniform code of conduct across the business where everyone knows how much or how little we need to put in, and what the expectation is from the plane. Because, like I said, if it's just a case of submitting case studies and proving yourself in that first instance, and that's very different to what a lot of people quite often ask for but don't tell you, or expect we don't tell you. So I think a uniformed response code would be really
amazing. I mean, we've worked through my questions here a lot quicker than I thought we would go. So just before we go to the floor, I mean, what from each of you, what is one change you'd immediately think would improve the sort of the pitching landscape right now?
I think I mean, if we could do that, that'd be amazing. I think we've kind of touched on it already, but sort of transparency and you know, but just like we said, I think quite often if you question the brief, you're often a little bit criticised or frowned upon. It's like, well, that's the brief. Like that, we need you to respond to that, and you try to ask some questions and get clarity on certain things, which would help you produce a better proposal for the client. I think there just needs to be a little bit of transparency around. To your point, how many people are you approaching? Are you approaching your incumbent? And actually, how are you scoring these proposals? What is it that's most important to you, and where does the weighting lie? Because if cost is, 80% of the decision making process, then you've then got a question, or you can then answer when you're going to respond or not. So I think probably the evaluation process and how it's being scored, and so few tenders that I see, or so few RFPs actually have that detailed. So
Actually, I think there's probably a couple. I mean, transparency is something we obviously keep coming back to. But to build on that, I think we also could have a code of what we need and what's expected on the client side, and actually something around that just to help them would be really, really helpful as well. And how we get the feedback and getting the scorecard, from the outset. And actually what we find going through the feedback process afterwards, we learn so much going through that. And actually we probably spend more time on the ones that we lose than we do on the ones that we win. But going back to how important the time is, if we put all of that time and effort into it, and, you should have time to give us a call at the beginning and we can go through that. But equally, we should get the time at the end for the feedback and really understand, why it didn't land, or what we could have done better. Because that just helps us improve, and it really helps keep the team engaged and keep that value for the time and the effort that we put in.
I mean, some of you sitting here, it's a couple of agencies actually an audience which I get a chance to work for years, basically, and we build a strong relationship. And transparency and honesty comes with me as a given. Like, there is no hidden anything. I literally tell you how many agencies you're pitching against. I tell you what it is. My RFP brief is long. It's very long, but it's comprehensive, and you can actually get all the details and ideas from it. So you don't have to ask me too many questions, because throughout the years, I know what questions the agency would come back with. So I try to build into my RFP. So then, as much as you are busy, we're also busy, and it's hard to find the time. So transparency is a key. But I also expect transparency from the agency side. So it's not only us from the client, but I want you to be in a position telling me I can't do it, but I can do something in return, or we can't really help you with this, but we know someone who can help, and let's work together. But when it comes to, if I would have to pick one, it would definitely be more discipline and really big on selective shortlisting agencies, because I think sometimes we feel like we put in more agency in place, it will help us to make a decision, but we don't really think about the agency side, we think about ourselves. So we've been very selfish. So I think we have to be very disciplined. Less is more, once again. So I think that would fix that. And that would also help agencies to be more, you can invest properly, because you're going against two agencies versus all of a sudden seven, and you're not only pitching for me, but you're trying to figure out, like, who are the agency potentially? Like, let me check the LinkedIn, which agency she's working with, like trying to do more research on that front than actually on the other. And then you can need to actually go to the deeper thinking and more ideas moving forward. So I think very discipline and shortlisting is a very important, what I would like to definitely pitch it.
Amazing. I suppose we can open it up to the floor now. Does anybody have any questions for our panelists out here? Anybody? Right.
Hi, I'm Holly from Make Events. I was just going to ask the agencies actually, so your sort of big RFPs that you get in, are they tending to come from client referral, digital marketing? Where do you see the big ones coming through?
We said that meant for the what's for the.
We can't hear me. I think it's probably, the bigger ones coming in through the procurement side of things, really. We see that mostly in it on the. That's. I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah, I think. So you say where do they usually come from? So from me personally, quite often will be clients that I've worked with in the past that will move to other organisations. You've obviously done a good job with them previously, and they want to set you with you, but there's red tape to obviously get through on to get on the preferred supplier list, which typically involves an RFP process to be on there for sort of 3 to 5 years. So that's usually where I would get it from. So kind of word of mouth, stroke referral.
Yeah, the reason I was asking is because that's where ours come from, and we're just really investing in digital marketing at the moment, and it's going to be, I wonder if any will come through that. But Rob, just to your point on the Teams thing before, we've done one where it was 9 agencies in a room for the afternoon. But that was good.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think it's interesting. We won that, Holly.
We did win it.
Oh, that's good then. We were talking about this before actually because we kind of say quite often one of our rationale or one of our reasons to actually completing an RFP will be whether or how invested they've been with us before as well. So generally that will involve a nurturing process. It will involve coming to some of the events that we've organised. It will involve coming and seeing it on site. How strong is that relationship? So I personally would be very hesitant about if something came through as a digital channel that where we'd had no contact with anyone before, whether or not we were realistically going to get that work, or whether it was just going to be we're one of 5 and we're just making up the numbers with 2 who they already know.
Thank you. You're both great agencies as well, so thanks for that.
Thank you. As are you.
Is there anyone else? No.
Hi. I was just wondering how realistic is it to get agencies to have the same process in place, and if that was something that could be done, who would manage that process?
Oh, good question. I'm going to go back to my default here, and it was something I was talking about earlier. With if anyone's read it, it'd be interesting to see, show of hands actually, a book called Win Without Pitching. Has anyone come across it before? A guy called Blair Ennis. He is basically was an agency owner from I think New York, and got sick to the back teeth of pitching for work and being expected to give away creative ideas for nothing. And he created this 12-step manifesto, and it's one of the best books I've ever written. It's like literally everything. It's like your dream. It's just his argument is, well, there has to be some kind of code of conduct that we're all working to. And actually, if we could somehow take that and apply it across all of the agencies, I mean, let's start local. We'll start in West Yorkshire, then spread out. We'll incorporate Manchester. But if there was something like that kind of already exists, that for me would be a brilliant starting point. It's a brilliant book, and if anyone hasn't read it, I would strongly advocate you do, because that for me is where we're aspiring to get to as an agency. It's being the authority in what you do, and actually having being bold enough to know that that's the case, and being bold enough to actually say no when people just aren't playing ball all this. So yeah, it's a brilliant book.
In some ways, it's already happening because, like I say, we're all talking to each other more, and I think where we're sharing some of those stories, it's like, well, actually and you all start realizing either you all are operating similarly on some sort of codes of conduct, or your red flags are similar. So I think that opening up that dialogue, which is happening naturally anyway, is already starting to take place. I don't know what if you're seeing that from your side, you get a better view of that landscape.
Yeah, definitely. I think I actually have to turn the question as well. One more question to you both. I think as an event professionals, we tend to network with each other. We tend to have communities when we meet on a regular basis. We talk through challenges and what's new on the market, and we kind of not necessarily compare, but we learn from each other, right? Because we have people who's been in the business for 2 years, for 15 years, for 20, 25. And I'm very fortunate to be part of some of the communities and meet on a regular basis. My question is, do agencies do that? Do you actually tend to meet with another agency and talk about the challenges? And that goes into the processes. Can you, as an agency committee, can come together and build some standards, like the standard procedures and models where we as a clients can use, but then also shows us like how you collaborate? Is that something that exists? Like, and obviously I don't know because I haven't been in agency side, so I know from the other perspective.
Not to my knowledge, but I mean, to that question, like if we want to change, we've got to make change. Yeah, maybe this is the moment. Well, this up in the day, the world changed. Yeah, so yeah.
I think that would help. Like that would show us as the clients, and you work together collaboratively. You share the good practices, you share the knowledge, but at the same time, you show us like, you really. That's the best. We meet as events professionals. We talk about the challenges, and one of them it is agencies. One of them it's try to do it all, but not being able to do it. How do we select the agency? How are we being fair towards the agency you bring to the table? Do we use the same agency I've used for the past years? And my answer would be yes and no. Like I've been in the business for so many years, and there's the 2 agencies or 3 which I've been for the past 10 years. But when I do RFP, I always bring new agency on board, a couple of them. How do I find them? LinkedIn is my best resource, by the way. I'm a very visual person. I see the work you do, I do my research, and that's kind of based on seeing like what work you've done, your recommendations and feedback from other clients. But I think that would be super helpful. Maybe we should start the committee of agencies.
So
I'm just saying.
it's quite interesting because we're based in Leeds in West Yorkshire, and there is a collective of agencies called All in Leeds where there must be, well, I don't know, probably 100 digital and agencies across Leeds and surrounding areas who do meet up on a regular basis. But that should be the power to a bit of a lobbying power or use that as a foundation to kind of build something like that. So
And I think also do more of this, like not maybe necessarily in the forum, but like we meet more in a more relaxed environment where we can actually talk to each other and be open. Like this is the expectations we have, and also hearing from yourselves as well. Once again, it shouldn't come as a given. We're gonna pitch, we're gonna put all the money and resources to it just because we want to win client. And I think it shouldn't be the transaction part.
Any other questions for our panelists? Good.
Kind of regardless of the resources going into the pitching process, I feel like an important part of it is the energy going in from the team members. And how do you kind of go about the relative struggle to get the energy if you're the incumbent agency that's just got an RFP for said project? I think that's kind of something that we never really talk about, is like the demoralization, I guess, of receiving that RFP when you're the incumbent, and kind of getting the teams or your team to have that energy and that desire to actually get that work again. How do you guys go about that?
Yeah. So I would say, as the incumbent, you're in a fortunate position because you will generally know whether the relationship is going well or whether it's not. And if it's going well, then you've kind of got the power card, I would say. So you've got the insight that no one else has got. You've got you should have been doing probably regular reviews after events. You have a really good or you should have a good relationship with obviously the organizer. And I think that potentially is your opportunity to be able to say, okay, this is where we take a step back rather than working kind of in the business as such. We're kind of working on the relationship. We're almost working over it, and this is our time to kind of step back, take a deep breath, and bring in other ideas that we think could work for you. So I actually think it's quite energizing generally because it's an opportunity to kind of showcase maybe some of the stuff that they've not seen that you can do. If on the other hand, the relationship's not good and there's probably a reason that they've gone to tender, again, I would say you're in a powerful position because then really you've got the decision to say, actually, do you know what? We're declining to pitch, and we had that situation with one particular client, and they asked us to go to tender, and we said no, and actually yes, took the piece of business, and it was like fair enough. But it got to a point where it was like it wasn't right for us, and we took a step back, and it was the right decision for us and for the client. And as I say, we won't mention names. But no, I think so I think you're in a strong position either way.
Busy. Right. Any other questions? No.
From the sidelines, the cheap seats have just been standing by the speaker. Great conversation. I guess I come from it from a different angle. I know some of you know me, so we are a wellness partner to agencies and clients directly. But I'm interested to know if you're finding the crunch at the moment. We're finding where agencies are positioning themselves and then the budget's getting cut quite a lot. So then that second party, whether that's us or AV companies, etc., then it's just a knock-on effect down the line, isn't it? And then it dilutes it, and then maybe some things go in-house. Are you finding that still a struggle, or is that changing for you guys? Because for many a panel, it's always been the way, but I think there is a little bit of a change of holding our own worth and saying, no, we're not going to dilute this service. We're going to work with so-and-so, and we do need to find the budget. I don't quite know how it's sitting at the moment, because last year it was a very different conversation, but I'm just interested to see how you guys are finding it a year later.
We'll talk to that one.
I've got a thought if you want.
Go on, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Again, if I go back to the win without pitching document, one of the manifestos there is talk about price early, and I think for so long, people are just like, well, what's the budget? And like, dare we ask? And the client will sort of say, well, we haven't really got one, and then you kind of give them three figures, and well, it's definitely that one, so you have got one. So I think asking that question early on budget and asking if the budget has been signed off as well. We've been caught out recently where it's like, yeah, this is a budget, we're working to it. And then all of a sudden we submit the proposal. They said, oh, sorry, budget hasn't been signed off. It's like, well, why have we gone this far then without for it to not happen? So I think if you can have that conversation early about budgets and make sure that it's there, it's ready. Obviously, sometimes there is flex, like we said, that we're in a very uncertain economic climate at the moment and things do get cut. I would like to think that we're trying to build relationships with what we call partners, not just suppliers. So, there is that transparency with them. They know that, sometimes we all have to take a little bit of a hit to get in, but hopefully we'll kind of build it back up. Or we just have to shave off certain things and we almost have here's the essentials and here's a set of nice to haves. And quite often as we get through that initial process, we get the essentials signed off, but then different pots of money become available. We can tap into certain things. And I think it's, again, that comes back down to what Ewelina said about having an honest conversation, saying, look, this is probably nice to have, but this is something that is really going to enhance the event and help you achieve your objectives. So yeah, I try and have that budget conversation early to mitigate those challenges. But sometimes when we do, we've got a strong enough relationship with our partners to know that there's times where they win, there's times where we all have to take a little bit of a shot at it. But it's difficult to navigate sometimes.
I think it also depends how you're telling the story of the event. And then to your point, less is more. So where those sorts of things are coming into it, if it makes sense as part of the story of what you're trying to do with the event and it fits within that, you have to really focus in on whether it's wellness and what that's actually adding to the experience. And then similarly, having that transparent conversation. I think going back to your analogy before, like if you think about it, like, when you go out and get, you get your house done up, right? And you're going to get a few different, options. You kind of assume that there's sort of a 20% buffer. And I think there used to be an assumption of there being a 20% buffer or whatever that percentage is. And that's changed. And the budget now is the budget. But it's however you carve that up. And so being able to say, look, you can either have whether it's the bronze, silver and gold, or if you're going to focus the story and this is how this is going to be, then this is what you need in order to make that event work. And these are the partners that are going to help deliver that for you.
Yeah.
Or if you want it to go down this, then that's what this looks like. And so being able to tell it through that lens, because sometimes having the pricing conversation early can be helpful, but actually they don't know what they don't know.
No.
And so being able to tell it through the storytelling lens is sometimes a lot more helpful, but it does mean that you're not going to invite everybody to the party. You're just going to focus on the 3 that you really need to deliver and create that experience that you're trying to sell.
I think when I see my events, to be honest, the RFP brief is the most important part. I tell you in a brief what actually my expectations are, and I wouldn't want my event to be compromised by some of the costs because agency want to focus more on AV or more on the decorations. Like well-being comes in a bigger picture to our event. When I do events now, it's not more about, yes, we do have conference part, but it's not all about the big party. It's more about how you can find a balance. So I would want the event also to be balanced, be like between all the partners and how we can bring everyone together. But one part which I don't like about pitches, if I have to be frankly honest, this is my budget and I want you to present to me within the budget. And then you give me 15 other slides saying, this is additional things you could have if you have $500,000 more. And I'm like, why are you showing me this and getting me excited when I know I can't afford it? Like, don't you dare do that ever again. Because like I'm all hype on it. And until we get to the 15 page, you're telling me, yeah, they were actually optional. They're not in your budget. I really don't like that. I would rather balance it and do 30% of each. And when I do events, they super, like at the big on a scale, we're talking about 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 and attendees. The logistic part is the most important to me. So a lot of money goes into logistics and safety. I've got duty of care of my guests. And then everything else is spread between what actually we need. But well-being comes really big picture now. Is more about well-being and making everyone more welcome and really accessible versus the big hypes of partying and stuff. So I think it's a balance. But really speaking from the client perspective, I would wish the agencies to come to us with the balanced options and work collaboratively once together. And that goes to the point where how we can work together better in a better environment.
We have a set of questions that we always ask at the start of an RFP that are quite, some of them are quite spiky, but intentionally, as in to kind of really get people thinking. And one of the ones that we quite often ask is, do you want ideas to drive budget or do you want budget to drive ideas? Because it's 2 very different things. And quite often, if they don't give you a budget, very soon they want the budget to drive the ideas.
Speech without budget, like just...
Oh, we've had plenty. Doesn't go the
Say
same.
that, it's like someone asked me yesterday as well. I was introducing actually 2 different agency and a creative agency and AV to someone in Tallinn because a part of us doing the massive company-wide conference, we also do teams days, and those teams could be between 300 to 1,000, which means some of the admins assistant they need actually support. So I start introducing different agencies because I'm like, this agency is focusing on my 6,000. Whatever happens next, we need to bring different partners. And someone asked me, so what's the budget? And I'm like, well, think about it. We've got 700 people. We need to pay the venue hire and catering and safety and all that. So obviously we need to come up with the budget. Because the agency was like, is it 50,000, 100 or 300,000? So I'm like, no, we tell you the budget. I can't have you working on ideas of like, I don't know, you just pie in the sky and you just be like, okay, yeah, we'll do 50,000. Like, no, I would never imagine agency working for my pitch with not knowing what the budget is. So I really feel for you. Like,
I think it's quite interesting. Sorry, and I'm mindful of time, but as an agency, really, our job is to help you achieve your objectives at the lowest possible price. And that doesn't mean we'll be the cheapest, but it means that we'll give you the best value. And spending too little is massively dangerous because you could spend £200,000 and not achieve
I
anything.
like good stuff. Impact. It's all about impact, driving impact and spending the right money in the right direction.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So you'd rather spend
I'd rather spend more money but having
220 to achieve the objective
Yeah.
rather than 200 and achieve nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also having agency who can actually deliver what they're preaching for rather than trying to give them amazing ideas, but then delivery cost actually super low because there is a hidden cost which
Yeah.
quite frankly we're not aware of. Like I know your agency fee, but there is a lot of agency who mark in every single subcontractors they bring into the table and then marking on everything else, and then you're ending up actually paying for all the services actually for the final results.
Yeah.
Well, amazing. That brings us up to time. So thank you very much for everyone coming by. Thank you everyone for our lovely panelists as well. Well,
Thank you.
way to go.
Thanks.